The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Rosewood Palace as Prince Alexander stood at the tall windows of his private study. His hands trembled slightly as he held the delicate piece of parchment that would soon change everything. The official announcement was ready, but the weight of the moment felt heavier than any crown he would ever wear. Princess Sophia entered the room quietly, her silk dress rustling against the marble floor. Even after 3 years of marriage, Alexander still felt his breath catch when he looked at her. Today, however, her usual radiant smile seemed tinged with nervousness. Their newborn daughter had been sleeping peacefully in the royal nursery for 2 weeks now, but they had kept her name a closely guarded secret, even from the palace staff. "Are you ready for this?" Sophia asked, placing her hand gently on Alexander's shoulder. The prince turned to face his wife, noting the mixture of excitement and apprehension in her emerald eyes. "I've been thinking about this moment since she was born," Alexander replied, setting the announcement on his mahogany desk. "But, somehow, it feels more significant than I imagined. Once we announce her name, she becomes real to the world. She becomes public property in a way." Sophia nodded, understanding the weight behind her husband's words. They had both grown up in the spotlight, but bringing a child into that world carried responsibilities neither had fully grasped until now. Their daughter would be fifth in line to the throne, carrying the hopes and expectations of an entire nation on her tiny shoulders. The couple had spent countless hours debating the perfect name. It needed to honor tradition while reflecting their modern values. It had to be strong enough for a future leader yet gentle enough for the baby girl who currently slept unaware of her destiny. Family history weighed heavily on their decision, but they also wanted something that felt uniquely theirs. "Tell me again why we chose it," Sophia said, settling into the velvet armchair beside Alexander's desk. This had become their ritual over the past few days, as if repeating their reasoning would somehow validate their choice. Alexander smiled, his tension easing slightly. "Princess Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood," he said, the name rolling off his tongue like a prayer. "Isabella for your grandmother, the woman who taught you strength and compassion. Rose for my mother, who never lived to meet her granddaughter but who would have loved her fiercely. Catherine for the patron saint of wisdom and learning. And, because Isabella means pledged to God, which feels right for someone who will one day serve her people," Sophia added, her voice growing stronger with conviction. The royal press secretary, Margaret Thornfield, knocked softly before entering the study. A woman in her 50s with sharp intelligence and an unflappable demeanor, she had served the royal family for over 2 decades. She carried a leather portfolio and wore the expression of someone who had orchestrated hundreds of royal announcements. "Your Royal Highnesses," she said with a slight bow. "The press is gathering in the Blue Hall. Representatives from 23 countries are present, along with the national media. The announcement is scheduled for 11 o'clock, which gives us 30 minutes to review the final details." Alexander exchanged a glance with Sophia. They had discussed this moment extensively, but the reality of dozens of cameras and reporters felt overwhelming. Their daughter's first introduction to the world would be through careful words and posed photographs, a stark contrast to the intimate family moment they had shared just hours earlier. "Have we received any feedback from the Prime Minister's office?" Sophia asked, ever mindful of the political implications of their choices. "Prime Minister Harrison sends his congratulations and full support," Margaret replied, consulting her notes. "He's particularly pleased with the traditional elements of the name. The public opinion polls we conducted discreetly suggest strong approval for names that honor family heritage." The prince walked to the window again, watching as security personnel made their final preparations in the courtyard below. Black cars with tinted windows lined the circular driveway, and he could see the glint of camera lenses through the palace gates. The world was waiting, and every detail of this announcement would be analyzed, discussed, and remembered for decades to come. "There's something else we need to address," Margaret continued, her tone becoming more serious. "We've received intelligence that some media outlets are planning to speculate about the choice if we don't provide sufficient context. They're particularly interested in why you departed from some recent naming conventions." Sophia stood and joined her husband at the window. "What kind of speculation?" "Some are suggesting that choosing a name with Spanish origins reflects a political statement about immigration policies. Others are wondering if the length of the name indicates a return to more formal royal traditions after years of simplification. Alexander felt his jaw tighten. Even their daughter's name would become a political football, dissected for meaning that existed only in the minds of commentators and critics. He had hoped to shield her from such analysis for at least a few years, but he was beginning to understand that royal children had no such luxury. "We choose her name out of love and respect for our family," Alexander said firmly. "Isabella is beautiful, strong, and carries meaning that spans cultures and generations. That's our message, and that's what we'll emphasize." Margaret nodded approvingly. "I recommend we include a brief explanation of each name's significance in the written statement. This will help control the narrative and reduce speculation." As they finalized the details, Princess Sophia excused herself to check on the baby one more time before the announcement. The royal nursery was located in the east wing of the palace, painted in soft yellows and decorated with artwork from children around the kingdom. Princess Isabella lay sleeping in her carved wooden crib, a family heirloom that had cradled 5 generations of royal babies. Sophia gently stroked her daughter's cheek, marveling at the perfect features that seemed to blend the best of both parents. Isabella had Alexander's strong chin and Sophia's delicate nose, with wisps of dark hair that caught the morning light streaming through the lace curtains. "Your papa and I are about to tell the world your name, little one," Sophia whispered. "I hope someday you'll understand why we chose it, and I hope you'll wear it with the same grace your great-grandmothers did." The baby stirred slightly, as if responding to her mother's voice, then settled back into peaceful sleep. Sophia wondered what dreams filled her daughter's mind, what hopes and fears would shape her as she grew up in the unique position of being both cherished child and public figure. Back in the study, Alexander reviewed his speaking notes one final time. The announcement would be brief but carefully crafted, designed to convey warmth and accessibility while maintaining the dignity befitting a royal occasion. He had practiced the pronunciation several times, wanting to ensure that his daughter's name sounded as beautiful to the world as it did to his ears. "5 minutes, Your Royal Highness," Margaret announced, straightening the papers in her portfolio. Prince Alexander adjusted his navy suit jacket and checked his appearance in the antique mirror that had reflected the faces of his ancestors for centuries. Today, he would add his own chapter to the royal family's continuing story, introducing the newest member to a world that would watch her grow, stumble, succeed, and hopefully flourish. Sophia returned from the nursery, her face glowing with the quiet confidence of a mother who had just gazed upon her sleeping child. She wore a powder blue dress that complemented her husband's suit, and together they looked every inch the modern royal couple they had worked so hard to become. "She's perfect," Sophia said simply, and Alexander knew she wasn't just referring to their daughter's physical beauty. In that moment, their choice felt absolutely right. Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood would carry her name into the future with dignity, strength, and the love of parents who had chosen each syllable with infinite care. As they walked toward the Blue Hall, their footsteps echoing in the marble corridors lined with portraits of previous royal generations, both Alexander and Sophia felt the weight of history and the lightness of hope. Their daughter's name would soon belong to the world, but the love behind it would always belong to their family. The massive oak doors of the Blue Hall came into view, and they could hear the murmur of voices and the subtle sounds of camera equipment being prepared. In a few minutes, Princess Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood would officially exist in the public consciousness, beginning her journey as both beloved daughter and royal heir. Margaret paused at the doors, her hand on the ornate brass handles. "Are you ready, Your Royal Highnesses?" Alexander squeezed Sophia's hand, drawing strength from her presence as he always did. "We're ready," he said, and together they stepped forward into the bright lights and waiting world beyond. The Blue Hall of Rosewood Palace had been transformed into a sea of sophisticated chaos. Cameras lined the back wall in perfect formation, their lenses trained on the ornate podium where Prince Alexander and Princess Sophia would soon stand. Reporters from every major news organization filled the gilded chairs, their notebooks ready and smartphones recording every moment leading up to the official announcement. James Mitchell from the Royal Broadcasting Network adjusted his tie nervously as he prepared for what would be one of the most significant royal announcements in years. As the senior royal correspondent, he had covered dozens of similar events, but something about this moment felt different. The secrecy surrounding the baby princess's name had generated unprecedented speculation, and the entire kingdom seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. "Testing, testing," came a voice from the sound booth as technicians made final adjustments to the audio system. The acoustics in the Blue Hall were notoriously challenging, with its soaring ceilings and marble surfaces creating echoes that could distort even the most carefully spoken words. Near the front row, Eleanor Blackwood from the Royal Times checked her watch impatiently. She had spent weeks investigating possible names, consulting historians and royal experts, building elaborate theories about what the royal couple might choose. Her latest article had suggested they would opt for something modern and unconventional, breaking with centuries of tradition. She hoped her sources had been correct. The atmosphere grew more electric as palace staff made their final preparations. Fresh white roses, the symbol of the Rosewood royal family, adorned every surface, filling the hall with their delicate fragrance. The flowers had been specially selected from the palace gardens, where they had been tended by the same family of gardeners for 4 generations. Margaret Thornfield appeared at the side entrance, scanning the room with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to managing media events. She made subtle hand signals to her assistant, ensuring that every camera angle had been optimized and every reporter had received the prepared materials they would need for accurate coverage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Margaret announced, her voice carrying clearly through the hall despite speaking at normal volume. "Their Royal Highnesses Prince Alexander and Princess Sophia will join us momentarily. Please remember that this is a joyous family occasion, and we ask that all questions be respectful of the personal nature of this announcement." The murmur of conversation immediately quieted, replaced by the soft whirring of camera motors and the occasional rustle of papers. Photographers adjusted their equipment, knowing they would have only a brief window to capture the perfect shot that would grace tomorrow's front pages around the world. At exactly 11 o'clock, the massive doors at the front of the hall opened with a soft whoosh of air. Prince Alexander appeared first, his bearing confident but somehow more vulnerable than usual. Princess Sophia followed immediately behind, and together they walked the length of the blue hall toward the podium, their footsteps muffled by the ancient Persian carpet that had witnessed countless historic moments. The assembled media rose to their feet in a spontaneous show of respect, the sound of chairs scraping against marble creating a symphony of anticipation. Camera flashes began immediately, casting brief bright lights across the royal couple's faces as they approached the microphone array. Alexander paused for a moment at the podium, his hands resting lightly on the polished wooden surface as he surveyed the faces before him. These were the same reporters who would chronicle his daughter's entire life, who would capture her first steps, her first words, her triumphs, and her struggles. In this moment, he felt the full weight of what it meant to share his child with the world. "Good morning," Alexander began, his voice steady and warm. "Princess Sophia and I are delighted to share with you, and through you with our beloved kingdom and the world, the name we have chosen for our daughter." The silence in the room was profound, broken only by the soft mechanical sounds of recording equipment capturing every word. Sophia stepped closer to the microphone, her hand finding Alexander's in a gesture of mutual support that did not go unnoticed by the assembled photographers. "After much consideration and, with deep respect for our family's history and traditions," Sophia continued, "we are proud to announce that our daughter will be known as Her Royal Highness Princess Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood." The name hung in the air for a moment before the hall erupted in controlled activity. Reporters immediately began typing on their phones, transmitting the news to editors and newsrooms around the globe. Camera operators zoomed in for close-up shots of the royal couple's expressions, capturing the pride and joy evident on both their faces. "Isabella," Alexander said, allowing the name to resonate through the hall, "honors Princess Sophia's grandmother, Isabella Martinez, who taught us both the meaning of strength, compassion, and service to others. She was a woman who dedicated her life to helping refugees and displaced persons, and we hope our daughter will inherit her spirit of humanitarian service." The explanation drew nods of approval from several reporters who had researched the family connections. Isabella Martinez had been widely respected for her charitable work and was considered a beloved figure even outside royal circles. "Rose," Sophia continued, "remembers my dear mother-in-law, Queen Rose, who passed away before she could meet her granddaughter but whose legacy of grace and dedication to duty continues to inspire us every day. She believed deeply in the power of education and the importance of preparing young people for leadership." Alexander's voice grew slightly thick with emotion as he spoke about his mother. Queen Rose had died in a car accident when he was 22, and not a day passed that he didn't think about how much she would have loved being a grandmother. "Catherine," he continued, regaining his composure, "honors the patron saint of wisdom and learning. We chose this name because we hope our daughter will always value knowledge, seek understanding, and use her education to serve others effectively. Eleanor Blackwood scribbled notes furiously, already composing her article in her mind. The names were traditional yet meaningful, honoring both sides of the family while conveying clear values about the kind of future leader the royal couple hoped to raise. We want to emphasize, Sophia added, that while Isabella carries the weight of royal tradition and responsibility, she is first and foremost our beloved daughter. We are committed to ensuring she has as normal a childhood as possible while preparing her for the unique role she will someday assume. Questions immediately arose from the assembled media, hands shooting up throughout the hall. Margaret Thornfield had anticipated this and stepped forward to moderate the brief question period they had agreed to include. "Your Royal Highnesses have time for just a few questions," Margaret announced. "Please keep them brief and respectful." James Mitchell was recognized first. "Your Royal Highness, the name Isabella has Spanish origins. Was this choice influenced by Princess Sophia's heritage, and what message does this send about the modern royal family's international perspective?" Alexander and Sophia exchanged a quick glance, having anticipated this question. "Isabella is a name that appears throughout European royal history," Alexander replied diplomatically. "While we certainly celebrate Princess Sophia's multicultural background, we chose Isabella primarily to honor her grandmother's memory and the values she represented. Our family has always been international in scope, and we're proud that our daughter's name reflects that rich heritage." The next question came from a reporter in the back. "Princess Sophia, how do you feel about raising a daughter in the royal spotlight, given your own experiences adapting to royal life?" Sophia smiled warmly before responding. "Every parent wants to protect their child while also preparing them for their future. Royal life has unique challenges, but it also offers extraordinary opportunities to serve others and make a positive impact. Alexander and I are committed to helping Isabella understand both the privileges and responsibilities that come with her position." A third reporter raised her hand. "Your Royal Highness, will Princess Isabella be receiving any special titles beyond the traditional ones, and what role will she play in royal duties as she grows up?" "Isabella will grow into her royal role gradually," Alexander answered. "For now, she is simply our daughter, and we intend to let her be a child first. As she matures, she will slowly assume appropriate responsibilities, always with her education and personal development as our primary concerns." Margaret stepped forward to signal the end of the question period. "Their Royal Highnesses thank you for your attention and ask for your continued respect for their family's privacy as they enjoy these early weeks with their new daughter." As Alexander and Sophia prepared to leave the podium, spontaneous applause broke out among the assembled media. It was an unusual display of emotion for such a formal gathering, but something about the royal couple's genuine affection for their daughter and their thoughtful approach to naming her had touched even the most hardened reporters. The couple paused at the edge of the carpet, turning back to wave briefly at the cameras before exiting through the same doors they had entered. As soon as they disappeared from view, the hall exploded into activity as reporters rushed to file their stories and photographers uploaded their images. Within minutes, news of Princess Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood's name was trending on social media platforms around the world. Royal watchers analyzed every aspect of the announcement, from the symbolism of the name choices to the body language displayed by her parents during the reveal. Back in their private quarters, Alexander and Sophia collapsed into comfortable chairs, the tension of the morning finally beginning to ease. They had successfully shared their daughter's name with the world, and the response seemed overwhelmingly positive. "I think that went well," Sophia said, loosening the pearl necklace that had felt tight around her throat during the announcement. "Better than I expected," Alexander agreed. "Now Isabella belongs to everyone, not just us." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, processing the magnitude of what they had just accomplished. Their daughter's public life had officially begun, marked not with fanfare or celebration, but with a simple announcement of the name her parents had chosen with such care and love. The news of Princess Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood's name spread across the globe with remarkable speed. Within an hour of the official announcement, major news networks were broadcasting special segments analyzing every aspect of the royal couple's choice. Social media platforms buzzed with commentary, photographs, and speculation about what the name might reveal about the future direction of the monarchy. In the bustling newsroom of the Royal Broadcasting Network, senior editor Patricia Hammond watched as her team scrambled to provide comprehensive coverage of the announcement. Multiple screens displayed live feeds from correspondents stationed outside Rosewood Palace, where crowds had begun gathering spontaneously to celebrate the news. "Get me Dr. Eleanor Pembroke on line 3, Patricia called out to her assistant. Dr. Pembroke was the kingdom's foremost expert on royal history and naming conventions, and her insights would be crucial for providing proper context to their audience. Meanwhile, at the University of Wellington's Department of Royal Studies, Professor Michael Chen was already fielding calls from international media outlets seeking his expert opinion on the significance of the name choice. As someone who had spent 20 years studying royal nomenclature, he was fascinated by the careful balance of tradition and modernity that Alexander and Sophia had achieved. The name Isabella has appeared in royal families across Europe for centuries, Professor Chen explained to a reporter from the International Herald. But what makes this choice particularly interesting is how it bridges different cultural traditions while maintaining clear connections to both sides of Princess Isabella's family heritage. In the small town of Millbrook, about 50 miles from the capital, Sarah Jenkins watched the announcement replay on her tablet while serving customers at her family's bakery. As someone who had followed royal news casually over the years, she found herself unexpectedly moved by the thoughtfulness behind the name selection. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she commented to Mrs. Thompson, a regular customer who had stopped by for her weekly dozen dinner rolls. "You can tell they really put thought into it, not just picking something fashionable or trendy." Mrs. Thompson, who was 83 and had lived through 4 different monarchs, nodded approvingly. "In my day, royal babies got names like George and Edward, nothing fancy. But this Isabella, it has a nice sound to it. Strong but feminine, if you know what I mean." The conversation was interrupted by Sarah's teenage daughter Emma, who burst through the bakery's front door with her phone held high. "Mom, look at this. The princess's name is trending worldwide. There are already fan pages and everything." Emma showed her mother the screen, where hashtags like #PrincessIsabella and #RosewoodBaby were accumulating thousands of posts per minute. Artistic renderings of the name and flowing script competed with historical timelines showing other royal Isabellas throughout European history. Back at Rosewood Palace, the immediate family was experiencing their own flood of reactions. Queen Mother Victoria, Alexander's grandmother, had requested a private audience to share her thoughts on the name choice. At 91, she was the senior-most member of the royal family and her approval carried significant weight. "Isabella is a name with substance," the Queen Mother declared, settling into her favorite armchair in the palace's morning room. "It carries history without being old-fashioned, tradition without being stuffy. You've chosen well." Prince Alexander felt a wave of relief at his grandmother's words. Her opinion mattered deeply to him, as she had been instrumental in preparing him for royal life after his mother's death. Queen Mother Victoria had an intuitive understanding of public sentiment that had served the monarchy well for decades. "We were particularly touched that you chose to honor both sides of the family," she continued, addressing Princess Sophia directly. "Your grandmother Isabella sounds like she was a remarkable woman. I would have liked to meet her." Sophia smiled warmly at the elderly queen. She would have been thrilled to know her great-granddaughter would carry her name. "She always said that names were promises we make to our children about the kind of people we hope they'll become." In the royal nursery, Princess Isabella slept peacefully through all the excitement surrounding her name announcement, unaware that her identity was being discussed and celebrated around the world. The palace staff had been instructed to maintain normal routines despite the media attention, ensuring that the baby's care remained the top priority. Nanny Patricia Williams, a veteran of royal childcare who had helped raise Alexander and his siblings, carefully prepared Isabella's afternoon feeding while humming softly. She had witnessed many royal announcements over her 30-year career, but something about this one felt particularly special. "Your mama and papa chose a beautiful name for you, little princess," she whispered as she gently lifted Isabella from her crib. "Isabella Rose Catherine. It has a lovely rhythm to it, doesn't it?" Meanwhile, in the palace's communications department, the team was monitoring global reaction to the announcement with professional intensity. Social media sentiment was overwhelmingly positive, with particular praise for the meaningful family connections behind each name choice. "We're seeing especially strong positive response from international media," reported David Matthews, the deputy press secretary. "The Spanish press is particularly pleased with the Isabella choice, and several major outlets are running feature stories about Princess Sophia's grandmother and her humanitarian work." Margaret Thornfield reviewed the compilation of reactions with satisfaction. The royal family's reputation had evolved significantly over recent decades, moving toward greater transparency and relatability while maintaining appropriate dignity. This announcement seemed to hit exactly the right tone. "Any negative coverage we should be concerned about?" she asked, knowing that even the most popular royal announcements typically generated some criticism. "Very minimal," David replied, consulting his tablet. "A few Republican commentators are questioning the expense of royal ceremonies in general, but nothing specifically critical of the name choice itself. One blogger suggested the name was too international, but that's actually being countered by more voices praising the global perspective." As evening approached, international reactions began flowing in from royal families around the world. King Gustav of Sweden had sent a personal message of congratulation, noting that his own granddaughter shared the middle name Rose. The Spanish royal family expressed particular pleasure at the choice of Isabella, sending a ceremonial silver rattle that had been in their family for generations. Queen Charlotte of Denmark called personally to speak with Sophia, sharing her own experiences of raising daughters in the royal spotlight. The conversation lasted nearly an hour, covering everything from media management to ensuring normal childhood experiences despite extraordinary circumstances. "The most important thing," Queen Charlotte advised, "is to remember that she's your daughter first, princess second. The world will try to claim her, but you must protect that mother-daughter bond above all else." In royal households across Europe, similar conversations were taking place. Princess Isabella's birth and naming represented the newest generation of European royalty, and there was genuine interest in how Alexander and Sophia would navigate the challenges of modern royal parenthood. The evening news broadcasts provided extensive coverage of the day's announcement, with most programs featuring expert commentary and historical context. Royal biographer Amanda Sterling appeared on the National Evening Report to discuss the significance of the name choices. "What we're seeing here is a masterful blend of respect for tradition with acknowledgement of contemporary values," Sterling explained to anchor Thomas Wright. "Each name tells a story, not just about family history, but about the kind of leadership they hope to instill in their daughter. The choice of Catherine is particularly interesting," she continued. "Saint Catherine of Alexandria is associated with learning and wisdom, suggesting that education and intellectual development will be priorities in Princess Isabella's upbringing." Public reaction polls conducted throughout the day showed approval ratings above 75% for the name choice, with particularly strong support among women aged 25 to 55. The demographic breakdown suggested that the royal couple had successfully appealed to both traditional monarchy supporters and younger citizens who valued modern approaches to royal life. At Millbrook Primary School, teacher Jennifer Adams found herself adjusting her lesson plans for the following day to include discussion of the royal announcement. Several of her students had expressed excitement about sharing a name with the new princess, and she saw an opportunity to explore themes of heritage, family traditions, and cultural diversity. "We'll look at how names travel between countries and cultures," she explained to her colleague during their evening planning session. "Princess Isabella's name gives us a perfect example of how families honor their history while embracing their multicultural heritage." As the day drew to a close, Prince Alexander and Princess Sophia finally found time for a quiet dinner together in their private dining room. The formal announcements were complete, the media had been satisfied, and their daughter's name now belonged to history. "I keep thinking about what she'll think of our choice when she's older," Sophia mused, cutting into her salmon. "Whether she'll understand why we chose each name, whether she'll feel the weight of carrying them." Alexander reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "We chose with love and purpose. That's all any parent can do. The rest is up to her to decide as she grows into her own person." Outside their windows, the palace grounds were quieter now, though a few dedicated royal watchers remained at the gates with flowers and congratulatory signs. The world had welcomed Princess Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood with open arms, and her journey as a public figure had officially begun with a name that honored the past while embracing the future. 3 days after the official announcement of Princess Isabella's name, the initial media frenzy had settled into a more measured analysis of what the choice might mean for the future of the monarchy. Royal correspondents from around the world had filed their stories, social media had moved on to other trending topics, and life at Rosewood Palace had begun to return to something resembling normalcy. However, the ripple effects of the announcement continued to spread in unexpected directions. In the small village of Isabella del Mar, located in the coastal region where Princess Sophia's grandmother had been born, the local mayor announced plans for a celebration to honor their connection to the new royal baby. The village had never received international attention before, and residents were both excited and bewildered by their sudden place in royal history. Maria Santos, who owned the village's only cafe, found herself serving coffee to journalists from 3 different countries who had traveled to learn more about the original Isabella Martinez. At 78, she was one of the few remaining residents who had actually known Sophia's grandmother personally. Isabella Martinez was special, even as a young girl, Maria told a reporter from the Royal Times while wiping down tables with practiced efficiency. She had this way of listening to people, really listening, that made everyone feel important. When she left for the capital to work with refugees, we all knew she would do great things. The reporter scribbled notes frantically, eager to capture authentic details about the woman whose memory had inspired a royal name. These human interest stories were often the most compelling aspects of royal coverage, connecting abstract monarchy to real people with real lives and genuine emotions. Back at Rosewood Palace, Princess Sophia was experiencing her own flood of memories triggered by the global attention to her grandmother's legacy. She had requested access to the family archives, hoping to find photographs and documents that might help Isabella understand her heritage when she was older. In the palace's climate-controlled archive room, Sophia carefully examined a collection of letters her grandmother had written during her early years working with displaced persons. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, reflecting the urgency of the humanitarian crises she had addressed daily. "My dearest Carlos," one letter read, addressed to Sophia's grandfather, "the work here is heartbreaking but essential. Today I helped a mother find her children who had been separated from her for 3 months. Her joy when they were reunited reminded me why this work matters more than comfort or convenience." Reading these intimate glimpses into her grandmother's character, Sophia felt renewed confidence in their name choice. Isabella Martinez had embodied the kind of principled service that she hoped her daughter would someday embrace, regardless of what specific path her royal duties might take. Prince Alexander, meanwhile, was dealing with the more practical implications of their announcement. Palace security had noted an increase in tourists gathering at the gates, hoping for glimpses of the royal family or simply wanting to be near the place where Princess Isabella was growing up. While the attention was generally positive, it required adjustments to their daily routines. "We may need to modify your morning run route," suggested Captain James Morrison, head of Royal Protection. "The park path you usually take has been attracting more crowds since the announcement." "Nothing concerning, just people hoping to see you." Alexander nodded, understanding that this was simply part of their reality. His own childhood had been shaped by similar considerations, and he had learned to navigate public interest while maintaining some semblance of normal family life. In the royal nursery, Princess Isabella remained blissfully unaware of the attention her name had generated. At 3 weeks old, her days consisted primarily of sleeping, feeding, and the gradual process of adjusting to life outside the womb. Nanny Patricia maintained detailed schedules to ensure the baby's routine remained stable despite the excitement swirling around her. "She's got her father's strong grip," Patricia observed to Sophia during the afternoon feeding. "And those eyes, they seem to take in everything. Very alert for such a young baby." Sophia smiled as she cradled her daughter, marveling at how perfectly the name Isabella seemed to suit her personality, even at such a young age. There was something regal about the way the baby held her head, something purposeful in her movements that suggested she might indeed grow into her royal role naturally. The international response to Princess Isabella's name had exceeded everyone's expectations. The palace communications team was still processing congratulatory messages from heads of state, fellow royal families, and ordinary citizens from dozens of countries. Each message was carefully catalogued, with the most significant one saved for a special album that would someday be presented to Isabella herself. One particularly touching letter came from a group of refugee women in northern Africa who had learned about Isabella Martinez's humanitarian work through news coverage of the royal announcement. They had collaborated on a hand-woven blanket featuring traditional patterns from their respective cultures, sending it as a gift for the baby who would carry their benefactor's name. We hope Princess Isabella will grow to understand the importance of helping those who have lost their homes, their letter read in careful English. Her great-great-grandmother gave us hope when we had none. Maybe someday Princess Isabella will do the same for others. Margaret Thornfield was particularly moved by this letter and made arrangements for it to be framed alongside the blanket in the palace's collection of meaningful gifts. These spontaneous gestures from ordinary people often proved more precious than formal presentations from dignitaries. The academic community had also embraced the royal name announcement as an opportunity for serious discussion about modern monarchy. Dr. Helen Beaumont from the Institute of Contemporary Governance published a research paper analyzing how royal naming choices reflected evolving attitudes toward tradition, multiculturalism, and international diplomacy. The selection of Isabella Rose Catherine represents a sophisticated understanding of soft power, Dr. Beaumont wrote. Each name component sends specific messages about values, heritage, and future direction while remaining accessible to diverse populations. Universities across Europe began incorporating the announcement into their political science and cultural studies curricula, using it as a case study in how modern royal families balance historical continuity with contemporary relevance. At St. Margaret's School for Girls, where Princess Sophia had been educated, headmistress Caroline Fletcher found herself fielding inquiries from prospective parents who suddenly wanted their daughters educated at the same institution that had shaped a future queen. The school had always been prestigious, but royal connections carried special cachet in certain circles. "We're pleased that Princess Sophia credits her education here with preparing her for royal life," Caroline told a journalist from Education Weekly. "However, we want to emphasize that our focus remains on developing independent, thoughtful young women, not simply training future royalty." The conversation highlighted broader questions about how royal children should be educated in the modern era. Alexander and Sophia had already begun discussing these issues, recognizing that their decisions about Isabella's schooling would be scrutinized and potentially imitated by other families. "I want her to understand privilege without becoming entitled," Sophia explained to Alexander during one of their evening conversations. "She needs to be prepared for royal duties while also being equipped to make her own choices about how to serve others." Meanwhile, the palace gift room was overflowing with presents sent from well-wishers around the world. Stuffed animals, handmade clothes, children's books, and artwork created by young admirers arrived daily. Each item was carefully inspected by security before being catalogued and stored, with the most special pieces displayed in Isabella's nursery. One particularly creative gift came from a group of elementary students in Canada who had researched the meaning of each of Isabella's names and created an illustrated book telling the stories of the remarkable women she was named after. Their teacher had coordinated the project as a way to teach her students about research skills while engaging with current events. The book featured colorful drawings of Isabella Martinez helping families, Queen Rose attending state functions, and St. Catherine surrounded by symbols of learning and wisdom. The final page showed a baby in a crown with the caption "Princess Isabella Rose Catherine, ready for adventures." Religious communities had also responded positively to the inclusion of Catherine in the princess's name. The Archbishop of Canterbury issued a statement expressing pleasure that the royal family had chosen to honor a Christian saint known for her intelligence and dedication to education. Saint Catherine of Alexandria represents the perfect blend of faith and reason, the Archbishop explained during his weekly radio address. Her example reminds us that learning and spiritual growth are complementary pursuits, not competing ones. Similar sentiments were expressed by religious leaders from other faiths, many of whom noted that honoring historical figures of wisdom and compassion represented values that transcended specific religious boundaries. As the first week after the announcement drew to a close, public opinion polls continued to show strong approval for the royal couple's choice. The name Isabella had climbed the rankings of popular baby names, with many expecting it to become one of the most favored choices for newborn girls in the coming year. Royal merchandise featuring Princess Isabella's name began appearing in gift shops around the capital, from delicate silver bracelets to commemorative plates. The palace had to issue guidelines about appropriate use of royal names and images, balancing commercial interests with respect for the family's privacy. Most importantly, Prince Alexander and Princess Sophia were discovering that announcing their daughter's name had deepened their own understanding of what they hoped she would become. The public response had reinforced their conviction that they had chosen well, but it had also clarified the enormous expectations that would surround Isabella throughout her life. Every letter we receive, every story we hear about what her name means to people, Sophia reflected while watching Isabella sleep, it reminds me that she belongs to something bigger than just our family. But she'll always be our baby first. 2 weeks had passed since the world learned that the newest royal baby would be called Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood, and the lasting impact of that announcement was becoming clear. What had begun as a simple revelation of a carefully chosen name had evolved into a broader conversation about identity, heritage, and the evolving role of monarchy in the modern world. Princess Sophia stood at the window of the royal nursery, watching gardeners tend to the rose bushes that had been planted throughout the palace grounds in honor of her mother-in-law's memory. The connection between past and present felt particularly strong in these quiet morning moments, when Isabella slept peacefully and the world beyond the palace walls seemed to pause in respectful silence. The baby had grown noticeably in her first month of life, developing the kind of alert awareness that suggested an intelligent and curious nature. Her dark hair had begun to show hints of the auburn that ran in Alexander's family, while her eyes retained the deep blue that reminded everyone of Sophia's striking gaze. "She's starting to track movement with her eyes," observed Dr. Margaret Reed during her weekly examination of the princess. As the royal pediatrician, Dr. Reed had delivered and cared for 3 generations of royal children, and she took particular pride in monitoring Isabella's healthy development. "That's perfectly normal for her age," Dr. Reed continued, making notes in the detailed medical record that would follow Isabella throughout her life. "She's meeting all her developmental milestones beautifully. You should be very proud." The pride was evident in both parents, but so was the growing awareness of the unique circumstances surrounding their daughter's upbringing. Unlike other babies, Isabella's every milestone would potentially become a matter of public interest. Her first smile, first words, and first steps would be anticipated and celebrated by people she would never meet. Prince Alexander had been grappling with this reality during his morning meetings with palace staff. The communications department presented him with weekly reports on media coverage and public sentiment, tracking how the royal family's image evolved in response to various events and announcements. "Public approval ratings remain exceptionally high," reported David Matthews, the deputy press secretary. "The name announcement has generated sustained positive coverage, particularly in international media. We're seeing increased tourism bookings and significant interest in royal family memorabilia." While the positive response was gratifying, Alexander found himself thinking more about the long-term implications. Isabella would grow up knowing that strangers around the world followed her life with interest, that her choices would be analyzed and debated, that her successes and failures would be magnified by constant attention. "We need to start thinking about how we'll handle her public appearances as she grows older," Alexander told Sophia during one of their evening planning sessions. "The traditional approach of keeping royal children completely hidden until they're older might not work in our digital age." Sophia had been reading about child development and the psychology of growing up in the public eye. She had consulted with experts who work with celebrity children and political families, seeking advice about maintaining healthy boundaries while fulfilling royal obligations. "Dr. Vanessa Morris suggests we consider controlled exposure from early on," Sophia explained, referring to a child psychologist who specialized in high-profile families. "Brief, carefully managed appearances that allow the public to feel connected without overwhelming Isabella with attention. The approach would require careful planning and constant adjustment, but both parents recognized that hiding from public interest was neither possible nor necessarily healthy for their daughter's development." Meanwhile, the global impact of Princess Isabella's name continued to unfold in unexpected ways. The village of Isabella del Mar had officially twinned with a town in England, creating cultural exchanges that brought new opportunities to both communities. Local craftspeople were experiencing unprecedented demand for traditional goods, and the regional economy was benefiting from increased tourism. Carmen Ruiz, a young pottery artist whose grandmother had known Isabella Martinez, found herself fielding orders from collectors around the world who wanted pieces made in the village connected to royal history. Her small workshop, which had barely provided enough income to support her family, was now booked with commissions months in advance. "It feels like magic sometimes," Carmen told a visiting journalist while shaping clay on her wheel. "My great-aunt used to tell stories about Isabella Martinez, how she helped families during the difficult times. Now, because a princess carries her name, our whole community has new hope." The economic ripple effects extended far beyond one small village. Publishers reported increased sales of books about humanitarian work and royal history. Names with similar heritage patterns experienced popularity surges as parents sought to emulate the thoughtful approach demonstrated by the royal couple. St. Catherine's Academy, a school for girls that emphasized academic excellence and social service, received a flood of applications from parents hoping to provide their daughters with the kind of education that produced young women capable of meaningful contributions to society. "We've always believed in developing both intellectual rigor and compassionate leadership," explained headmistress Elizabeth Hartwell. "It's gratifying to see these values receiving broader recognition, even if it's come through royal attention." The religious community continued to respond positively to the inclusion of Catherine in the princess's name. Several Catholic schools announced scholarship programs for girls pursuing studies in science and philosophy, reflecting St. Catherine's traditional association with learning and wisdom. Archbishop Michael O'Sullivan used his Easter sermon to reflect on the significance of names and the responsibility that comes with carrying the legacy of remarkable individuals. His words were widely quoted in media coverage of the ongoing royal story. "When we give a child a name with deep meaning," he preached to a congregation that included several government ministers and foreign dignitaries, "we offer them both a gift and a challenge. We give them examples to aspire to and ideals to uphold." The international diplomatic community had also taken note of the thoughtful multicultural approach demonstrated by the royal couple. Ambassador Elena Rodriguez from Spain made a formal presentation to the palace, offering a collection of historical documents related to Queen Isabella I of Castile, after whom many subsequent Isabellas had been named. "These documents represent our shared heritage," Ambassador Rodriguez explained during the presentation ceremony. "They remind us that names carry stories across borders and, through centuries, connecting us to broader human experiences." The gift was particularly meaningful because it provided Isabella with tangible connections to the historical tradition of strong female leaders who had shared her name. When she was older, she would be able to read about queens, saints, and social reformers who had carried the name Isabella with distinction. Princess Isabella herself remained wonderfully oblivious to the international attention surrounding her name and early life. Her days followed the peaceful rhythm of infant care, feeding, sleeping, brief periods of alert observation, and the growing recognition of her parents' faces and voices. Nanny Patricia Williams documented each small development in a leather-bound journal that would someday be presented to Isabella as a record of her earliest months. The entries captured both ordinary baby behavior and the extraordinary circumstances surrounding her upbringing. "Today Princess Isabella smiled for the first time in response to her mother's voice," Patricia wrote in her careful script. The smile lasted several seconds and was clearly intentional, not simply gas or reflexive movement. Both parents were present and were moved to tears by this milestone. Such moments reminded everyone in the palace that beneath all the protocol and public attention, they were simply caring for a beloved baby who happened to be born into extraordinary circumstances. The palace staff had adapted to the increased security and media attention with professional grace, but they also took special pride in their role protecting Isabella's childhood. Maids, gardeners, cooks, and security personnel all understood that they were helping to create the environment in which a future leader would form her earliest impressions of the world. "She'll remember the feeling of being loved and protected," reflected Mrs. Eleanor Hastings, the head housekeeper who had worked in the palace for over 40 years. "That's what we can give her, regardless of all the royal duties she'll face later." As Isabella approached her 6th week of life, her parents began planning for her christening, which would be her first major public appearance. The ceremony would require balancing religious tradition with modern sensibilities, family intimacy with public interest, and royal protocol with genuine spiritual meaning. "We want the christening to honor the faith traditions that shaped both our families," Sophia explained to the Archbishop during their planning meeting. "But we also want it to reflect the values we hope to instill in Isabella as she grows up." The Archbishop nodded thoughtfully, understanding the delicate balance required for such occasions. The ceremony should celebrate not just her entry into the Christian community, but also her unique calling as someone who will serve both God and country throughout her life. Plans for the christening would unfold over the coming weeks, providing another opportunity for the public to share in Isabella's journey while respecting the sacred nature of the religious ceremony. As evening approached and Isabella settled into her nighttime routine, Prince Alexander and Princess Sophia reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed since announcing their daughter's name. What had seemed like a simple decision had opened conversations about identity, heritage, responsibility, and hope that would continue long after the initial media attention faded. "I think we chose well," Alexander said softly, watching Isabella sleep in her ornate crib surrounded by gifts from around the world. "I think she'll choose well too," Sophia replied, her voice filled with the quiet confidence that comes from deep maternal love combined with careful preparation for the challenges ahead. Princess Isabella Rose Catherine Rosewood slept peacefully, carrying the dreams of her parents and the hopes of a nation into whatever future awaited her. Her name, chosen with such care and announced with such joy, would be the first gift her parents gave her for the remarkable journey that lay ahead.